It's Merger Wednesday. The countdown continues. 7 years until the convergence of biology and machine. Neural interfaces are no longer theory. They're the scaffolding of a new consciousness. But what does that mean for identity? For free will, for the soul? This is where we build the frameworks for ethical, philosophical, and spiritual growth for the next phase of human evolution. We're not just upgrading hardware. We're rewriting what it means to be human. Each week, we explore the biotech breakthroughs, decode the cognitive shifts, and prepare the mind for the merge. This isn't about fear, it's about readiness. Because the future isn't waiting. It's already wiring in. This is about preparing human consciousness for the most significant leap in our species' history. If you think this is just about chips and brains, you're not ready. But we'll get you there, one Wednesday at a time. So sit back and relax as we take you on a journey on Merger Wednesday.
Welcome to the Final Boss Podcast, Merger Wednesdays, or should I say, Lost Voice Wednesdays, right? Lost Voice Wednesdays. That's what we're going to Man, I'm grateful to be here. Hey, Ariel, thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us tonight. More people will be coming on board. Thank you for being here, man. I really appreciate it. Listen, I have a great show for you tonight. Great show. We're going to get right into it in a few. But to each and every last single one of you that are coming on board for Merger, listen. I need you to understand this show is the doctoral premise, right? So some of the language can be a little heavy, but then I added the layman's block so you have a better understanding, right? So now that I've said that, each and every last single one of you, thank you for being here. To my final bosses, to my smarts, to my motivators, to my warriors, right? We're watching, whether they're watching on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, Kick, Spotify, or Instagram, or Facebook. I don't know if I said Facebook or not, but Facebook too, right? Thank you. Change your Condi. Thank you for, yes. I hope it heals soon too, right? Can't continue like this. I've been resting my voice and keeping it warm for the most part, most of the day. So you see my attire right now. It's about keeping the voice warm, right? Hey, Ariel, software, man. I'm good. How are things on your end, right? Right? So, oh, yes. To everyone out there, no matter where you're watching at, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. That is the greeting of the day. Thank you. That is the greeting of the day. So, listen, make sure you go like, share, subscribe. Like, share, and subscribe so we can continue to develop more shows, continue to get the message out there to the people, continue to grow this community, Find the Boss Nation, Find the Boss Podcast, Find the Boss Community. What did I miss? Find the Boss Nation, Find the Boss Community, Find the Boss Podcast. Oh, what's the most important? The Final Boss family, right? The Final Boss family. And the wonderful, always present Andrea is in the building. Yes, she is one of our daily watchers, right? She's very consistent. And so is Shakandi. They're both very consistent in watching the show, man. So I'm grateful for having those guys. And to everyone else who's joining us, right? Thank you for being here, man. Tonight is our doctoral show, and we are getting ready to get into it as soon as I get rid of these banners that can be annoying sometimes. So, banners gone. Oh, man. Whew. That does wonders for the voice. The voice likes it. All right, man. Enough of the games. Enough of the fun time. It's time to get into the show, right? Listen, what if I told you something? What if I told you, right? What if I told you you have been, what if I told you you have been walking around your entire life thinking you're biological, right? You've been thinking you're biological. Flesh, blood, bone, chemistry, right? All wrong. All wrong, people. You are running an operating system right now. 100 billion processors networked together, right? Firing electrical signals, encoding memory, executing decisions, adapting its own architecture in real time without a reboot, without a technician, without a power cord. You've been doing this since before you took your first breath. Your brain is already a computer, not metaphorically, not as a figure of speech, but structurally, functionally, operationally, a computer. And tonight, I'm going to prove it. For those who are just joining us, welcome to Merger Wednesdays. This is episode number 13, right? I'm the Final Boss. This is the Final Boss podcast. And I am your guide through the merge, right? I'm your guide through the merge. This is Merger Wednesdays, episode 13, and it is the Final Boss episode 209. I have to put that out there just in case, people get lost in the sauce, right? This is season 4, the rebirth, right? And the rebirth is not about becoming something new. It is about finally seeing what you already are. Tonight is that moment, the moment you stop looking at your brain as pure biology and start recognizing it as the most advanced computing architecture ever assembled by the great architect, right? The creator of all things, right? And you cannot merge with something you do not understand. And tonight, you're going to understand it for yourself. We're here every Wednesday at 9 p.m. live Eastern time, right? And before we go deep, let me set the stage, right? Let me set the stage. We're on 5 days a week, 9 p.m. live, right? Sick and shut in, we're here, right? We're here. And this podcast, we have the most consequential conversations that are happening, right? On this planet right now, right? That is why this show exists. Merger Wednesdays is the doctoral level arm of the Final Boss podcast. Every episode belongs to my upcoming book about these very shows. Every claim has been verified, right? Every stat has a source. You're not getting speculation, you're getting research, right? And tonight at episode 13, we're in arc 3. We're in arc 3. And deep inside the neural interfaces and brain computer integration. But before we walk about connecting your brain into a machine, we establish a foundational argument. Your brain already functions like a computer. That is the thesis. We defend it with the science, right? For my smarts who want every citation, for my final bosses building with this information, for my motivators who need the full picture, for my warriors who treat knowledge as ammunition. All 4 of you. We're going to get into it. And thank you for being here. Right? So listen, brains don't run programs the way computers do. They are the computation shaped by physics, energy, and tightly coupled processes across many scales, right? Bojan Milikovic from the Paris-Saclay Institute of Neuroscience and Jean Aru from the University of Tartu published in Neuroscience and Biobehavior Reviews on February 2026. That was last month. They wrote a paper, and that paper was titled On Biological and Artificial Consciousness, a Case for Biological Computationalism, right? And it stated, they are the computation, not running a program, not hosting software. Your brain is the computation itself. The hardware and software are the same thing, inseparable. That is the finding that changes everything we discussed tonight. Silicon computers separate memory from processing. Data lives in one location. Computation happens somewhere else. A bus carries information between the two. That is the von Neumann architecture, right? Every laptop, every server, every data center on this planet, even your cell phone, runs on that exact example. But your brain does not, right? The brain does not. The grand architect did not create it that way. He created memory and processing to happen in the same place at the same time at the same moment. The same neurons that fire to retrieve a memory also process the meaning of the memory simultaneously. No buses, no latency, no separation. That is not a limitation. That is a design efficiency engineers are still actively trying to recreate. Before we can merge with AI, you must understand that you are already operating a biological intelligence more sophisticated than anything humans have ever engineered. Not in raw speed, but in architecture, right? Arc 3 starts here, and it starts with knowing thyself, right? So let us establish the foundational framework. Man, a computer is a system that takes input, processes it, stores the result, right? And produces output, not the box on your desk, right? Not the chip in your phone. Any system performing those four operations qualify: input, process, store, output, right? Your brain executes all four continuously in parallel across 100 billion nodes, right? 100 billion. Input or your senses, your eyes, ears, skin, nose, tongue, all converting external data into electrical signals the brain can read. Light hitting your retina triggers 100 million photoreceptors simultaneously. Color, data, location data, movement data, all extracted in parallel before you are consciously aware of seeing anything, right? And then there's processing, right? Neurons firing in networks. A single neuron receives signals from up to 10,000 other neurons at one time. It weighs those signals, decides whether to fire, and either sends the signal forward or does not. Fire or no fire, right? Sound familiar? That is binary logic. Power on, power off. The same fundamental operation running every digital computer in existence. And then there's storage, right? Storage. This is your memory. Short term in the hippocampus, long term and distributed across cortical networks, right? Procedural memory in the cerebellum, and basal ganglia, right? Emotional memory anchored in the amygdala, multiple storage systems operating in parallel across different regions simultaneously, right? And then there's your output: movement, speech, decisions, behavior. Your motor cortex sends commands down the spinal cord in parallel. Legs, arms, hands, posture, and facial expression all coordinated at the same time from the same system, right? Your brain is a computer. The question is, what kind? That is where the science goes doctoral. And here's my layman's block. Think of your brain as the most advanced computer ever built. It takes the information from the world through your senses, processes that information through a massive network of neural cells, saves what matters across different storage regions throughout your head, and sends commands to your body to act. That, my friends, is exactly what a computer does. The difference: your brain does it with electricity and chemistry, runs continuously without a power cord, and operates on about 20 watts, less than a light bulb. No digital computer on earth matches what it does at that energy level. The almighty grand architect, the creator, designed us perfectly. That's my language block, right? Now, let's put the architecture on the table with real numbers, right? 100 billion neurons. Think about that. 100 billion. 100 billion. Roughly the same count as stars in the Milky Way galaxy. Each neuron connected to between 1,000 to 10,000 other neurons through structures called synapses. Total estimated synaptic connections in a single human brain: 100 trillion. 100 trillion, trillion with a T, right? 100 trillion connection points, all active, all adjusting, all learning. Compare that to a modern GPU used to train large AI models, roughly 80 billion transistors operating in binary at speeds approaching 10 billion arithmetic operations per second. On raw processing speed, silicon wins. But neurons do not compute in series. They compute in parallel across 100 billion nodes simultaneously. In 2015, researchers Katja Grace at UC Berkeley and Paul Cristiano at Carnegie Mellon developed a benchmark called traversed edges per second, or TEPS, to measure how quickly a system moves information within its own network. Using the benchmark against IBM Sequoia, the top supercomputer at that time, their upper estimate placed the human brain at about 30 times faster in terms of internal information throughput. That benchmark is a decade old, and supercomputers have advanced significantly since. The point stands: raw arithmetic speed and total network throughput are completely different measurements. Your brain wins on the throughput argument. And here's the number that demands attention on the doctoral level, right? Benegev, Segev, and London, published in the Journal of Neuron in 2021, asked a different question, asked a direct question. How many layers of artificial neural network would it take to fully replicate the input-output function of single biological cortical neurons, right? They built a massive simulation of one pyramidal pyramidal neuron from a rat's cortex and trained deep neural networks against it until they hit 99% accuracy at a millisecond resolution. The answer is this: 5 to 8 layers, roughly 1,000 artificial neurons to replicate one biological cell. That study was confirmed in the Quantum magazine, Singularity Hub, and multiple peer-reviewed follow-up analysis. It is not a fringe finding. It is a documented benchmark now foundational to computational neuroscience. One cell, 5 to 8 ratio, 5 to 8 AI layers are what you are running is not a simple hardware, right? It's not a simple hardware. And here's my layman's block. Your brain has 100 trillion connection points. Scientists wanted to know how computationally complex a single brain cell actually is. They built AI to replicate one neuron and found it takes between 5 and 8 layers of artificial intelligence just to match what one biological cell does. That, my friends, is not a small number. The AI systems making headlines today are built on that same layered architecture. Your brain does it in one single cell, and you have 100 billion of those. That's the latest about, right? And here's what nobody stops to consider. Your brain runs off electricity right now as you process these words that I'm saying. Every thought you're having at this very moment is an electrochemical event. Voltage differences across cell membranes, ions moving through channels, electrical signals called action potentials traveling down axons at speeds between between 1 and 120 meters per second, depending on the pathway. Every memory you retrieve, every word you process, every emotion you experience, electricity and chemistry are working together in coordination. EEG machines. Read this directly. Sensors on your scalp display your brain's electrical activity as wave patterns. Delta waves in deep sleep. Theta in meditation. Alpha when resting and aware. Beta during active thinking. Gamma during peak cognitive states, right? Different frequencies for different mental states. That is the signal processing. The same engineering principle used in wireless networks, radar systems, and satellite communication. USC Vertibi School of Engineering published a breakthrough in Nature Electronics in 2025. Their team built artificial neurons using diffusive MEM resistors that physically replicate the electrochemical behavior of biological neurons. Silver ions in an oxidized substrate, generating electrical pulses the way your neurons do. The lead researcher, J.J. Yang, director of USC's Center of Excellence for Neuromorphic Computing, stated plainly that existing computer systems were never designed to process massive amount of data or learn from limited examples. They had to study the biology to build something bigger, something better. They came to your brain for the answer. They came to your brain for the answer. Right? The doctoral implication. If your brain runs on electricity and digital computers run on electricity, the fundamental operating language is the same. The merger is not between two incompatible systems. It is between two electrical systems that evolved and were engineered respectively toward the same computational goal. The bridge was always there. The bridge was always there. And here's my layman's block, right? Here's my layman's block. Your brain runs on electricity right now. Every thought, every memory, and emotion is an electrical signal moving through nerve cells. Scientists at USC had to study your biology because what your brain does naturally, computers were never designed to replicate. They found the physics of how your neurons fire gave them the blueprint for building more efficient AI hardware. Brain and computer are not opposites. They are both electrical. The merger was always architecturally possible because they share the same foundation. And this is where we go full doctoral. So hold on. Make sure you take some notes. And don't you go nowhere. Right? Don't you go nowhere. No classroom break. No hallway pass. Sit down. Take some notes. We're going full doctoral, right? Because February 2026, Neuroscience and Biobehavior Reviews on biological and artificial consciousness, a case for biological computationalism. This paper dismantled the dominant assumption in AI research. The assumption is called computational functionalism. The idea that consciousness is simply information processing. Get the right functional organization running regardless of substrate, silicon, carbon, and anything in subconsciousness should follow. That assumption underpins most serious AI consciousness arguments being made in research institutions today. Milikovic and Aru say the assumption is broken. 3 properties of biological computation that no digital system replicates, right? 3. Here's the first. Hybrid dynamics. Your brain is neither purely digital nor purely analog. It runs both simultaneously. Neurons fire discrete spikes. Those are digital events. But those spikes happen inside a continuous field of voltage gradients, chemical concentrations, ionic diffusion, and time varying conductances. Discrete events embedded inside continuous dynamics, always at the same time. No digital computer does this. Digital is purely discrete from transistor to output. Second, right? Scale and separability. In a computer, software separates cleanly from hardware. The algorithm runs identically on one chip or another. That separation is what makes code portable, right? In the brain, that separation does not exist. The algorithm is the hardware. Ion channels influence dendrites, which influence circuits, which influence whole brain dynamics. You change anything at one level and you change the computation at every level. They are intangible, right? And entangled from molecule to thought. And then the third, right? The third, metabolic grounding. Your brain burns 20% of your total body energy while representing only 2% of your body mass. Every architectural decision your brain has made through evolution reflects the energy constraint. The researchers argue that this is not a footnote. It is a design principle. Consciousness may be direct product of having to compute more with dramatically less under sustained metabolic pressure. Their conclusion, stated directly in the paper, in biological computation, the algorithm is the substrate. The physical organization does not support the computation, it constitutes it. Your brain is not running on a program that's running biological hardware. It is a physical process that computes by existing. Consciousness is inseparable from the biology producing it. That is why the merge is not about replacing you, it is about extending you. And here's my layman's book. Scientists have argued for years whether a machine could ever be conscious. One side says yes, if it processes information the right way. The other says no, you need living biology. A 2026 paper argues both sides miss the fundamental point. Your brain computes differently than any digital system ever built, not because of processing speed, because the physical matter your brain is made of and the thinking it does are the same thing and separable in every level. That means a brain computer interface is not about overwriting how you think, it is about adding reach and speed to a system that already possesses something no machine has ever achieved. Layman's block, people, layman's block, right? And listen, here's what separates your brain from every piece of hardware ever engineered. Your brain rewires itself, not through externally loaded software updates, not through hardware replacement. The physical neural architecture restructures based on what you do, what you learn, what you repeat, and what you survive. That is neuroplasticity. No engineered system operates this way. When you learn a skill, the synaptic connections between relevant neurons strengthen. They use a pathway repeatedly and it becomes faster, more efficient, more automatic. Stop using it and it weakens. Your brain continuously prunes, grows, and adjusts, even at rest, right? Even during sleep, right? Research published in 2025 identified 5 distinct turning points in brain organizational structure across a human lifespan. At age 9, 23, 32, 66, and 83. At each stage, the brain undergoes major structural and functional reorganization, not gradual drift, architectural turning points. The operating system restructures itself without external instruction. No static hardware does that. Now, when you apply this to the merge, this is precisely why neural interfaces are viable. You are not connecting a static machine to a dynamic one. You're connecting a dynamic machine to another dynamic machine. When Neuralink extended its prime clinical study into Great Britain at University College London Hospital in Newcastle, or when Synchron integrated NVIDIA AI processing into its endovascular uh, Stentrode platform, both programs were built around neuroplasticity. Both are counting on the brain to recognize the new connection, adapt around it, and incorporate the interface into its existing architecture. Given sufficient integration time, a BCI does not remain external technology. It becomes part of the computational system. And here's my layman's one. The critical difference between your brain and a computer cannot rewire itself. It does what it was built to do until you update it or replace it externally. Your brain rewire on its own every time you learn something, practice a skill, or live through something difficult. Your brain physically changes its structure. Connections strengthen, New pathways form, old ones fade. This is precisely why brain computer interfaces work. Your brain does not reject the new connection. Over time, it adapts to it. The adaptation is called neuroplasticity, and it is the biological engine underneath everything. The merge is building toward, right? To my smarts, my motivators, my warriors, and my final bosses, listen, listen. Sit and think about everything I just explained, right? Hold on to that. Sit with it, right? Go through your notes and understand this. Understand this very thing I'm about to tell you. The rebirth is season 4 structural lens, not a label, not a theme we mention in passing. A framework every episode this season is filtered through. Because rebirth is the most accurate description of what is happening to consciousness technology right now and what needs to happen in you before you can engage with what's coming. Rebirth requires a death first, not literal death, the death of a limited version of yourself so more accurate version can emerge. The version of you that needs to die tonight is the one that believes it is purely biological, that operates under the assumption that it limits our physical, that looks at brain-computer interface technology as something being done to humans from the outside by engineers and labs. That version cannot navigate what this decade is building toward because the research says something fundamentally different. You are an operating system. You have hardware, neurons, synapses, electrical chemical signals, software, learned patterns, memory networks, behavioral frameworks, all built from decades of experience. Processing parallel computation across 100 billion nodes, right? Simultaneously, right? You have storage, right? That's distributed across multiple brain regions, architected from different information types. The old version thought it was limited by biology. The rebirth version recognizes it as the most advanced biological computing system in the known universe. When Columbia University, Stanford, and DARPA developed BISC, BISC, a miniaturized brain chip streaming thoughts in real time, documented in December 2025, they were not invading foreign territory. They were building an interface for a system that was already computational before they arrived. When Synchron threaded a stent through a patient's jugular vein to capture neural signals from a blood vessel sitting on the motor cortex, they were not installing alien technology. They were extending a pre-existing architecture. The rebirth tonight is the shift from biological being to recognized computational system. Same brain, completely different understanding of what the brain is. That understanding is the foundation arc of Arc 3, and that's what Arc 3 is built on. Now, let me bring this from theory to current verified moment, right? The BCI field crossed from research curiosity into clinical acceleration in 2025 and is moving faster through 2026. Researchers at the University of Houston have labeled this the translation era. Private investment has shifted multiple companies from small feasibility studies into multi-center trials. Neuralink expanded the PRIME study into Great Britain in 2025. GB Prime, running at University College, London Hospital, and Newcastle, ALS patient Brad Smith operated a motorized camera at home using the N1 implant. The fully implanted chip now has documented real-world, non-clinical use cases outside a hospital environment. Synchron released an updated stent rod platform integrating NVIDIA AI processing and Apple Vision Pro in 2025. Patients with severe paralysis controlling digital and physical environments through neural signals captured from inside a blood vessel sitting on the motor cortex. No open brain surgery, no craniotomy, right? Precision neuroscience, advancing its layer 7 cortical interface, a 1024 electrode array resting on a cortical surface without penetrating brain tissue. FDA cleared as a temporary intraoperative mapping device. First human recipients were documented in 2025. Then you have Parodromics, right? Parodromics received FDA investigational device exemption approval for its Connexus system. The Connect One trial targets speech restoration specifically, not cursor control, speech as the primary clinical endpoint. Mass General Brigham published its 2026 neuroscience predictions, projecting neural interfaces combined with closed loop neuromodulation will reach a clinical turning point for spinal cord injury outcomes this year. This projection comes from one of the most credentialed hospital systems in the world. The brain-computer interface is a current medical device category for FDA designations, active multi-site trials, documented real-world outcomes in 2025 and 2026. And here's my lamest block, right? Here's where things stand right now. Multiple companies have brain-computer interfaces operating inside real human beings, not experiments, clinical trials with FDA oversight. Neuralink has patients in the US and UK. Synchron has patients controlling computers through a device threaded through a blood vessel. No brain surgery required. This is not coming. It is here. It's not science fiction. It's science now. The question is no longer whether it works. The question is how fast it scales and what standards get established while it does, right? That is the layman's block. This next segment is for my smarts and for my final bosses also, right? Who want the layer underneath the layer. Your brain communicates in a language. Understanding it is precisely why brain-computer interfaces are possible, right? The language is called neural code, the pattern of action potentials, the spikes, the neurons fire in response to stimuli and internal states. Information is encoded in the frequency of those spikes and the precise timing between them. How often a neuron fires, the gaps between firings, the synchronization between neighboring neurons, that is the signal decoding. It is the entire BCI industry. When Neuralink places 1,024 electrodes into brain tissue, those electrodes are listening to spike patterns. When a patient thinks about moving a hand, specific neurons fire in specific patterns. The electrode array captures those patterns. Software decodes them. A cursor moves, a device activates. Thought to action translation. It works because the brain's language is electrical and therefore readable by an external device. Research presented at the Society for Neuroscience 2025 annual meeting documented stable, high accuracy speech and cursor decoding maintained over 2 years with a chronic intracortical BCI. 2 years of sustained clinical performance. Excuse me. Not a demonstration, a track record. Now, here's the doctoral level. And here's the doctoral layer, right? Research applying a framework called CHARM to neuroimaging data from over 1,000 participants in the Human Connectome Project found something significant. Individual neuron-to-neuron transmissions are relatively slow, 10 to 20 milliseconds per transmission. Yet the brain solves complex problems faster than those individual speeds should mathematically allow. The explanation: different regions of the brain synchronize across long distance in a way that researchers compared to quantum coherence, where physically separate regions behave as a unified system rather than an isolated component. The brain overcomes slow local signaling by functioning as a non-local synchronized system at scale. What this means is, for the merge, decoding the brain is not only about reading local spike patterns. It requires understanding how spatially separate regions synchronize across the full architecture. That is still an open research frontier, and it is the frontier that will determine how much of complete human cognition can eventually be extended and interfaced. And here's my layman's block. Right? Your brain uses electrical spike patterns to carry information. Think of it as a code. Short bursts, long bursts, timing between them. The pattern is the message, right? I just figured something out. The pattern is the message. The pattern. BCIs work by reading those patterns and translating them into commands a device executes. Think about moving your hand. Specific neurons fire in a specific sequence. The interface reads the sequence and acts. The advanced question researchers are working on now is how distant parts of the brain coordinate with each other across the whole system. That large-scale synchronization is what allows you to think as fast as you do, despite the slow speed of individual neuron transmissions. Solving that synchronization fully is the next major frontier in this field. That was the layman's block. Reading patterns like Morse code. Morse code is done in patterns. Braille is done in patterns. It's very interesting. Very interesting. Reading binary, on and off, ones and zeros, is in patterns. Your brain does the same, right? Very interesting. Now, let's integrate everything we built tonight, right? Because episode 14, next week, we're going to be covering synchron versus Neuralink, right? The race to establish the dominant neural interface standard. Two different philosophical approaches: invasive versus endovascular, maximum bandwidth versus minimum surgical risk. You cannot understand why the debate matters until you understand what both sides are connecting to. Tonight, establish that. We established that tonight. Your brain is a computational system running on electricity. It encodes information in neural spike patterns. It stores data across distributed parallel networks. It adapts its own physical architecture through neuroplasticity. It runs individual cells that require 5 to 8 layers of AI to replicate. It performs internal information transfers that a purpose-built neuromorphic supercomputer targeting 228 trillion operations per second was constricted to attempt can match, right? That is what sits on the other side of your brain-computer interface in clinical development studies today. The full merge argument stated plainly. The merge is not about replacing biological intelligence with artificial intelligence. It is about recognizing that the biological intelligence is already computational and asking what becomes possible when you extend the output architecture of that system. The bottleneck is bandwidth. Your brain processes internally at a rate no current external interface can fully capture. You think faster than you type, speak, or gesture. The output channel is the constraint, not the cognitive capacity. BCI removes that bottleneck. When thought to text becomes clinically reliable at scale, when you communicate at the speed of cognition rather than the speed of your hands, the functional boundary between your biological processing and digital processing dissolves, right? The merger is not two foreign systems being forced together. It is one computational system getting its output architecture upgraded. You are not being modified. You are being freed from slow output on a fast processor. Now, I'm going to speak to each and every last one of you in this community. Smarts, final bosses, motivators, final boss, motivators. Wait a minute. Smarts, motivators, final bosses. Who am I missing? I'm missing somebody. Warriors. Man, how can I forget my warriors, bro? That's crazy. My warriors, right? Smarts, final bosses, motivators, warriors. Yes. Listen. To our smarts. You came for the citations. Malikovic and Aru Neuroscience and Biobehavioral Reviews, February 2026. Benegiv, Segiv, and London Neuron, August 2021. 5 to 8 AI layers per biological neuron. USC Vertibi, Nature Electronics, October 2025. Diffusive MEM resistor, artificial neurons. Deep South Western Sydney University, ICNS. Professor Andre Van Schnock, 2028. Not 2028. That was the same year, 2025. 228 trillion synaptic operations per second at BISC, BISC, Columbia, Stanford, DARPA. December of 2025, right? Yes, smarts. Neuralink, GB Prime, UCLH, and Newcastle Synchron Stentrode with NVIDIA and Apple Vision Pro, Society for Neuroscience 2025. David Branham, 2-year chronic BCI performance data. Mass General Brigham, 2026 clinical predictions. Human Connectome Project, charm analysis. All references at the end of this episode. Pull every paper. Verify every claim. That is what I want. To my final bosses, you build with information. Here's your intelligence from tonight. The BCI market is a present market, not a future one. A FDA designed devices, active multi-site trials, institutional backing from the most credentialed hospital systems in the world. Private capital accelerating through 2026. People who understand this architecture early position ahead of its adoption curve. This is what final bosses do. To my motivators, the same brain that carried you through everything you've ever been through rewired itself on the other side of every one of those experiences. Neuroplasticity is the mechanism behind every comeback you have ever made. You did not just survive your hardest seasons, you restructured your operating system to process the world differently afterward. That happened automatically. That is what your brain does without being asked. And to my warriors of the community, who I almost forgot, I'm so sorry, guys. My warriors, here's the battlefield intelligence, right? The race to establish the dominant neural interface standard is accelerating. Neuralink, Synchron, Precision Neuroscience, Paradromics, and Chinese state-backed companies are all competing for the same territory right now. This is not a technology race. It is a sovereignty race. Whoever builds the interface standard that scales first shapes how billions of human brains interact with digital systems for the next century. Warriors track power, track this space, right? Track this space. Now, let me bring this on home, right? Because season 4, the rebirth, and the rebirth requires the death of a limited version of yourself. Here's what died tonight, right? The idea that you are just biological, the assumption that your limits are physical, the belief that mind and machine exist in permanently separate categories. The version of yourself that looks at brain-computer interface technology as something foreign being applied to humans from the outside. One second. Y'all know I'm trying to fight this, my voice. Mm. All right. Whew. Whew. Mm. All right, get it together. Almost done. That neuroplasticity means you have been updating your own firmware, your own, and you've been doing it your entire life without even knowing it. That a signal, a one signal neuron outperforms 8 layers of artificial intelligence. You are not behind the technology. You are what the technology is modeled after. The merge is not about making you into a machine. It is about recognizing that the biological machine you already are is advanced enough to extend into networked artificial intelligence without losing what makes you conscious. The consciousness is yours. The substrate is yours. The computation is already running. Adding an interface does not change what you are. It expands what you can reach. That is the rebirth. That is tonight. And next week, on episode 14 of Rebirth, we take this foundation directly to the battlefield. Synchron versus Neuralink. 2 companies, 2 surgical philosophies, 1 target. The neural interface standard for the human race. Better not miss it. You need to be in the room. You need to be here, right? Episode number 14 of Merger is next week, Wednesday, 9 p.m. Now, as we close, right? As we close out Merger Wednesday, episode 13, I want you to hear this one line I'm about to say. This one line I'm about to say, I want you to carry it with you. Right? You spent tonight discovering that the machine you have been carrying your whole life, the one between your ears, is already computing at a scale that required a purpose-built supercomputer just to attempt the replication. Now imagine what becomes when the bandwidth is unlimited. That is what is coming. And you would not be caught off guard by it because you were in this room tonight. And to my smarts, my final bosses, to my motivators, to my warriors, season 4, the rebirth. You either see yourself differently after tonight or you miss the entire point. It's go time, people. It is go time. This has been Merger Wednesdays, episode number 13. Episode 209 of the Final Boss Podcast. I am the Final Boss. We are here 5 days a week. Each episode different at 9 p.m. live. I will see you again tomorrow for special guests. And if this information resonates with you, don't gatekeep. Share it out with at least 3 people. And if it does resonate, make sure you let it marinate in your spine. And always remember this. There's a heavy pain that comes with discipline, but the pain of regret is even heavier. I am here. We are here. And to each and every last single one of you, thank you for joining us. That is our show. And as always, good morning. Wait, hold on. Let me do this properly. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. This is the Final Boss Podcast. I am the Final Boss, signing off. And always remember, be balanced, be equal, and be smart. That is our show for tonight. Thank you for tuning in. See you again tomorrow at 9 p.m. for Special Guest Thursdays. Have a great one.